Hi, I'm Dr. Ransom. I teach saxophone lessons. Ferling number 16. In this video, I'll talk about alternate fingerings, tonguing, dynamics, and breathing. There is a lot more to this etude that I won't cover here. This is really just an intro to Ferling 16. To really get it contest ready, you should get some individual feedback from a professional, such as myself, and I'll be more than happy to sign you up for any number of private lessons that you want. Just send me an email to brian@briansaxophoneransom.com. That email address is also in the description below. Now, before we get started, you should write in the measure numbers like this. That way, whenever I mention a particular measure, you'll be able to find it quickly. Now, let's look at the fingering options for etude 16, starting with the many A-sharp fingerings. A-sharp is, of course, the same as B-flat, enharmonically speaking. There are several ways to finger A-sharp, B-flat on the saxophone. There's side A-sharp, B-flat, which looks like this. There's Bis A-sharp, which of course everyone calls Bis B-flat, where you press both the B key and the Bis key with one finger, your index finger. Hey, not everybody knows that. Then there's a whole bunch of A-sharp, B-flat fingerings that are pretty similar because you just press the B key and any of the right hand pearls in any combination. You see, all the right hand pearls are all connected to the Bis key. This comes in real handy in a lot of situations. For example, measure 4, the first three notes are F-sharp, A-sharp, B. This A-sharp calls for this fingering, which I call 1 and 2, because you use the first finger of your left hand and the second finger of your right hand. Using this fingering will enable you to navigate those three notes easily and without any blips. I notate it simply by writing a 1 over a 2, kind of like a fraction, but without the horizontal line. You can also use the same fingering in all the places marked here. Now look at these two red boxes. In these boxes, you don't have to lift the F-sharp key at all. This also simplifies these arpeggios and will result in a perfect smooth line. Measure 21 uses the 1 and 1 A-sharp fingering as shown here. Most of the other A-sharps can be played with the Bis fingering, with the exception of this one in measure 4, and for that you can use either side A-sharp or the 1 and 2 fingering. Let's not forget about all the forked F-sharps. Here are all the places I use that fingering. There is one more somewhat unorthodox fingering that I know of in this etude, and that is the last note in measure 17, high E. Getting from that high E to the following low D is awkward, whether you use the palm E or front E. However, if you press only the palm F key, not the palm F fingering, just the F key, and of course the octave key, it will sound like an E that is close enough to being in tune and definitely enable you to get to the following low D without a gap or a blip. This fingering should work on any brand or size of saxophone, although I have not actually tried them all myself. Yes, it's a bit out of tune, but worth it for the added speed. Tonguing. You should tongue exactly where it says. The articulation patterns in this etude are very tricky, and it may take some work for you to get them just right. If you're familiar with the Foundations for Superior Performance band book, it contains something called articulation patterns. There are 8 basic patterns in the book as follows. Slur 4, slur 3, tongue 1, tongue 1, slur 3, slur 2, tongue 2, tongue 2, slur 2, tongue 1, slur 2, tongue 1, slur 2, slur 2, tongue the upbeats like a swing or bebop pattern, and a ninth pattern not in the book where you tongue all four. If you think about the articulations in Ferling 16 in terms of these 9 patterns, it makes it a lot easier to learn the etude. For example, measure 1 is just slur 2, slur 2. Measure 4 is just tongue 1, slur 2, tongue 1. Measures 19 and 20 are slur 3, tongue 1, until the final 4 notes, which are all tongued. Okay, here's another approach. The best method I have ever heard of is to sing the music just for the sake of the tonguing. This is how you separate the tongue from the fingers so you can practice one without the other. I don't think it's necessary to sing the exact pitches, but mainly just the rhythms and the tonguing. Let's try it at 60 beats per minute. That's half tempo. Ta 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 ta. Ta 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 ta, and so on. Eventually, with enough practice, you can learn to tongue the whole thing at full tempo, like so. Ta 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 I know that probably sounds pretty ugly, but you know what? My tongue knows its job. Now I can go back and work on getting fast fingers. Let's talk about dynamics. As with most fast furlings, there is not much variety here. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't use dynamics. Without dynamics, music is just a bunch of notes. The first 8 measures is simply marked forte. I think mezzo forte is plenty. I mean, forte doesn't have much meaning without some context, other dynamics. Besides, if you play too loud, you may run out of air before you get to the end of the phrase. I think if you crescendo measure 7 and then diminuendo measure 8, that makes a nice phrase ending. Measure 9 is marked mezzo forte, but if you start softer, you'll have more room to grow. Do the crescendo, decrescendo in measures 10 through 12, and then get soft again to start measure 13. That way, your crescendo to 14 is more noticeable and more dramatic. Measure 17, you can start mezzo forte and crescendo to fortissimo like it says. But be careful not to play too strong here because your tone may suffer. When you play really loud on saxophone, you have to keep your embouchure really firm or your pitch will go flat. And that just sounds gross. After the fortissimo, there is no decrescendo marked, although practically everyone does one there. It looks to me like the fortissimo goes all the way to the first note of measure 21. Honestly, though, you could do that either way and it would sound just fine. Here's my idea for dynamics in measures 21 through 24. If you don't like it, don't worry about it. I won't be offended. So the first note in measure 21 is forte. The second note is subito piano, which means suddenly piano. Hey, not everyone knows that. So crescendo to the first note of 22, then do the same thing, forte piano. Then crescendo to the first note of 23. Then another subito piano followed by a crescendo in 23 and a decrescendo in measure 24. The dynamics I just described for measures 21 through 24 give that line a lot of energy and shape. If you put a little ritardando at the end of 24, that's a pretty good place to stop and catch a breath. Well, you have to breathe somewhere, and I don't know too many of us that can get all the way from measure 17 to the end. There are other places to breathe that you may prefer, or you could circular breathe, but that's another lesson for another day. Measures 25 to the end is good at mezzo forte, except that you do want to finish strong. Playing strong in measure 31 will help you get your low B to come out. That's a tough note, but don't play it too loud. It sounds gross. I guess I mentioned that before. About the breathing, you can take a breath at the end of measures 8 and 16 and 24. Of course, while you're working at a slower tempo, you'll have to breathe more often, but that should be one of your goals, to get 8 measures on each breath. And try really hard to fill up your lungs quickly. I hear a lot of students taking a longer time to breathe, but Ferling only gave you a half a beat of silence, so you have to practice breathing faster. Hey, if I can do it, you can do it. Okay, if you found this video helpful and or entertaining, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Thanks for watching.